You are listening to the Seven Rivers Student Ministry Podcast, a ministry of Seven Rivers Church in Citrus County, Florida. Here at SRSM, we believe that all students are lovable through a relationship with Jesus. Visit our website at sevenrivers.org/students. Hey guys, this is Mikey Puckett with Seven Rivers Student Ministry. You're listening to episode 18, The Suffering Life. This is one of my favorite stories. When I first heard this story, I was in my first year in seminary in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was walking through a season of depression, and my heart was cold and hardened. I remember sitting in the classroom, my teacher playing this video about a man named Rick Hoyt, the story that I'm about to share with you. And I remember watching this video. And I remember my facade and mask of pretending like everything was okay, everything was right. Actually, everything was great and perfect. I'm doing awesome. Began to crumble and fall apart. And as I was watching this video in the classroom in front of my classmates, I began to weep. Because this story pierced right through my facade, right through my mask, and went right to my heart and softened it. It's a story of the love between a father and a son. It's a story about a life full of suffering, but also a life full of love and grace. It's a story of you and I and our spiritual condition. Some of you listening maybe right now are walking through a season of depression. Maybe some of you are walking through a lot of hurt and pain and anxiety and stress. Maybe some of you are scared of the unknown and uncertainty of what's coming next. And the truth is even if you haven't walked through something like suffering yet, you will one day. And I feel like this story is a great story for you to know, to be able to lean on, especially when you're walking through the darkness and when you're walking through pain and hurt. So here is Rick Hoyt's story. Rick was born with cerebral palsy. The umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, cutting off oxygen to his brain. He wasn't able to do what most kids are able to do. His motor skills were significantly impaired. He wasn't able to feed himself. He wasn't able to walk. He had to be in a wheelchair. He was completely dependent on his mom and dad. There was a lacrosse player in Rick's community that was paralyzed. And there was a 5K run, a little run for this lacrosse player in the community. And Rick, who couldn't run, who was in a wheelchair, wanted to race in it. So Rick's dad began to train for this little 5K so that Rick would be able to run and honor this lacrosse player who was paralyzed. And so they finished this little race, coming in next to last. And that night, Rick told his dad, he said, "Dad, when I'm running, it feels like I'm not disabled." And it was in that moment that Rick's dad decided that they were going to run a lot of races. In the video, and you can Google this and you can go see it on YouTube, but in the video, and while I was watching, it has this scene of Rick's dad swimming in the water. And it starts off and you just see from above Rick's dad swimming in the water. And you see that he has these ropes tied to his shoulders, like a harness. And the camera pans down the ropes. And as it's going down the rope, you see that it's tethered tight. And you're going, okay, so what is this rope connected to? And then all of a sudden you see a boat that it's tethered to, a little raft. And in that raft is a man smiling from ear to ear. And it's Rick, his son, riding on the back of his dad. And then the next scene is, They beach the raft. He gets across. He swims across, and the next scene is, the dad picking up Rick, placing him in a wheelchair, and then running. And then the next thing is the dad picking Rick up and putting him on his bike and then biking. And this is how they would race. Rick and his dad would race this way. His dad doing all the work, and Rick just getting to enjoy being with his dad, feeling like he can fly. So you might be thinking, oh, they maybe just did, a few miles or swam a few miles, no, they did Ironman races. And if you don't know what an Ironman race is, it's essentially, this is what it is. It's a 2.4-mile swim, and a 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2 marathon. These are the races they would do. They actually did 6 Ironman races. If that's not enough, they, in 45 days, ran across and biked across America, covering 3,735 miles together. This is an incredible story of a father and son, of a father who loves his son so much that he would sacrifice his time, his body, his energy, train day in and day out, so that every single day his son could feel like he's flying. One of the beautiful things about the way they would race is Rick Hoyt would always finish before his dad. In the video, you see Rick raising up his arms and shaking them in the air as Rick and his dad, as they would pass the finish line. Rick didn't train. Rick didn't do anything with that race, with those races, the many races they ran. He didn't run a single mile. He didn't bike a single mile. He didn't swim a single mile. And his whole life, he hasn't run, biked, or swam any miles. But yet, he has finished every single race before his dad. Rick's life has been riddled with suffering, but also riddled with so much joy. He's lived a life of suffering, but he's also lived a life of joy. The reality is that you and I, spiritually, we are Rick. We are tormented in the soul. We struggle and we suffer, especially in this day and age with mental illness. We suffer and we struggle. Some days we feel like we can't even move. Some days we wonder if it's even worth existing. But here's the truth. You are being carried by a Father who loves you every step of the way. Your salvation from sin and death, your promise that all things will be made new and made right, all your suffering and pain will be undone, that promise, the only way that comes to you is because you have a Father who carries you. The only way that you will ever be able to finish this race called life is because you have a Father who carries you across the finish line. And so I remember sitting in that classroom and watching this video and hearing the story and just being amazed by just the sheer athleticism and human will power by Rick's dad, but also realizing that I have a heavenly Father. I have a dad who carries me, who sees me and knows that I'm hurting, who knows my pain, who knows that I'm struggling, and who gets in the water with me and puts me in a raft, who puts me in a chair and runs with me, who puts me in a bike seat and bikes with me. You have a dad right now who carries you and who loves you, even in the midst of your suffering. Our lives are riddled with suffering. But when you realize that it's in your suffering that you feel the arms of God the Father, it's in your suffering that you feel the pull of the rope that's tethered to his back. It's in your suffering that you feel the wind in your hair as you ride on his bike. And all you have to do is just let it be. Let it go. I am Mikey Puckett, and I am disabled. But when I'm with my dad, I feel like I can fly. I am Mikey Puckett, and I am dead in my sin. But when I'm with my dad, I'm alive. And this is only possible because of Jesus. So, what are you suffering with right now? What are you going through in your life? Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. But let it be what it is. And let God the Father carry you across the finish line. You are loved and you matter. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. If you would like to hear more stories and follow our devotions, you can go to www.sevenrivers.org/by life or by death. You are loved and you matter.